What is up and welcome to the Bruin Bible. Will Decker here with Jamal, Madni. We got a game to recap this weekend. Unfortunately, UCLA dropping to the Utah Utes on the road 44-24. We're going to have some comments about the coaching staff. Maybe there's some issues going on there. Jamal's got some great takes on that. We're going to talk about Garbers actually looking pretty good off the bench. And then we're going to have to talk about that atrocious defense, which I'm not looking forward to. But Jamal, we've got a sponsor for the podcast today. We've got to read it. It is our pleasure to be sponsored by MyBookie. When I gamble, I'm always looking for a way to get an edge. But at MyBookie, they double your first deposit. So you start with a leg up. Use my promo code LAFB. Sign up now. Claim your first deposit bonus with MyBookie and use the extra funds to kickstart your winning season. This weekend, lay the points with Arizona as they continue streaking in San Francisco. And with two top 10 offenses in the Titans and Rams going toe-to-toe on Sunday night, you can safely smash the over at MyBookie. Don't take my word for it. Head to MyBookie and sign up now using promo code LAFB. Get your money doubled and start winning today. Remember, good friends don't let friends win alone, so have your buddies use your referral link so you're eligible to receive an additional 250% bonus on their first deposit. Plus, it's unlimited to redeem, so all your friends can join the party at MyBookie. Bet anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Jamal, unfortunately, we had another loss for UCLA, our second in a row, dating back to the Oregon one at home. That was a heartbreaker. 44-24. Utah scored on their first 4 drives, touchdowns. The defense was problematic, and this is a team that now ranks 77th in total defense, 117th overall out of 130 teams in the pass. And, I mean, we luckily came into that game ranked 13th in the run defense in the entire country. We let up 290 yards rushing. We dropped to number 24 in the rush defensive category. Jamal, give me your impressions of what took place on Saturday, specifically starting with the defense.
Yeah, well, in a word, it was disastrous. I mean, I think you and I had spoken on an earlier Bruin Bible podcast about the state of the UCLA defense, and we actually talked about how the run defense was a positive, but we had mentioned, hey, is that a product of the run defense actually being stout the last couple of weeks, or teams just not choosing to run because they had so much success in the pass game? And it feels like the latter became ringingly true. Utah is who they are. Tavion Thomas, really strong run game, strong line. They've got a couple of tight ends, a slot receiver. So everything is sort of within a 10 to 15 yard diameter is the way they sort of play football. There was nothing really shocking or off-brand about what Utah has done, not just over the course of this year since Cam Rising has come into play, but also over the last several years. And so to just kind of lay an egg defensively and Utah just being able to run at will was really shocking. And truthfully, it could have been a lot worse than 44 points. In the third quarter, Utah was kind of throwing on 2nd and 2, 3rd and 2. They sort of lost focus a little bit. If they kept running, that could have been a lot worse. And so there was just very little resistance, very little fight in the defense. Unbelievably disappointing. Obviously, the Oregon loss was heartbreaking, but we were 39 yards away from a victory there on a game-winning drive. They showed tremendous heart and a great effort to come back. This effort was just so disappointing.
They got dominated on the line of scrimmage, and usually we've seen UCLA be able to get into that backfield, make plays. Caleb Johnson was out of the game. Maybe that did play a factor in them not maybe getting there as much, but usually the passing game hurts us. They had 3 rushers over 60 yards with Tavion Thompson going for 160 plus, 4 touchdowns. The guy was unstoppable. If you look at the stat line from a guy like Cameron Rising, who actually has been outstanding since he's taken over the Utah starting job, he threw for under 200 yards. I mean, it wasn't like the pass defense didn't do much. It's because they knew what they can get on the ground just about every play. And you have to Thompson, TJ Pledger had a couple of huge plays for the Utah backfield. It was just like we didn't stand a chance as soon as we got on that field. Obviously, Utah is an opposing place to play, but this begs the question, Azanaro, there's no way he's going to be returning after this year. I just cannot foresee a situation that's going to, allow him to return to the UCLA sideline. It's now becoming a question, as Chip Kelly's loyalty to Azanaro, will it maybe cost him his job? I know we talked about before the podcast, you have some reasons why you think Chip may stay, and I'm interested to hear that. But how does that play out for you? Do you think the Azanaro aspect of this thing is going to cost Chip his job?
Azanaro is done. There's just no way. There isn't enough body of work from this point moving forward to really justify him staying. You have a Colorado game, you've got a Cal game, you've got a USC game minus Drake London. These are all pretty pedestrian offenses at this stage of who UCLA is going to play. Quite frankly, they could probably get away outscoring most of those teams and still have holes defensively and walk away with 2 to 3 victories. What's remarkable to me also about Azanaro and Chip's sort of loyalty to him is that, and Ben Bolt said this to the LA Times the other day, that Azanaro hasn't done an interview in 4 years. He's the only coordinator in the Pac-12 that has not done an interview, has not spoken to the media since he's taken the job. And so part of Bruin fans' frustration is just not even being able to hear from this guy and see things from his perspective and try to empathize and try and understand a benefit of the doubt scenario. Azanaro's done. There's just no other way to describe it. They look clueless defensively. The secondary, obviously, we've talked about that at length, how undisciplined they've been over the course of the year. These unexplainable cushions that are being provided to average, moderate receivers. And now just the total absence of any physicality on both the pass rush side as well as from a run defense standpoint. Utah was averaging nearly 7 yards a carry on first down. Think about that. They were living in 2nd and 3 the whole game. You're not going to be able to stop anybody, any offense, if you're consistently facing 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3.
Yeah, I mean, that's damn near a first down every time they run the football on those drives. We were talking earlier, Chip Kelly, you've got 3 reasons why he thinks he should stay. I personally believe if he loses to a team like Colorado next week, there's no way he's coming back. I in my mind, I would pull the plug right there because Colorado is an incredibly inept team. If DTR is back next week, it sounds like there's more of a chance that he would be coming back. Maybe there's some helpful, sentiments coming from there. But if you lose to Colorado, that is as bad as it gets in the Pac-12 for a team not named Arizona. Give me 3 reasons why you think you should stay, because I think UCLA's fan base is incredibly frustrated with the lack of success going on.
Yeah, Will, I think these next 3 games are going to be incredibly telling, and we can feel the passion, we can feel the anger, we can feel things stewing with Bruin Nation all over social media, all over the news. And I don't think it helps matters that we're in a bye week, and so we have an opportunity to just kind of sit and stew. Look, at the start of the year, you and I sort of did a prediction. My first article of the year, my first podcast of the year, I said between 8 and 9 wins. I started at 8 and 4. I peaked out at 9 and 3 a couple of weeks ago. I've been hovering between 8 and 9 all year. And so the reality is Colorado, Cal, and USC minus Drake London, 3 unbelievably winnable games at this point. And so if he gets those 3 games, they go to 8 and 4. I think he survives. We move on to the next year. And I think that's kind of a slam dunk that he'll survive. If they lose to either Cal or Colorado, I think he's done.
Ooh.
I think where it gets interesting is, I think the most plausible scenario where they potentially finish 7 and 5, they beat Cal, they beat Colorado, and they stumble against USC in the Coliseum. And they finish up 7 and 5, which would really be categorically a disappointment, categorically a failure. But I think there's 3 fundamental reasons why he will come back. Number 1, I think we want to see Chip with another quarterback and another defensive coordinator. I think it's a little premature to fire him when he's only had one quarterback in his tenure. That's never happened in the history of UCLA football. A coach has always had multiple quarterbacks. And if you go back to kind of the 4-year history, obviously Wilton Speight was challenging DTR year one. Wilton Speight was a fringe Division I Power 5 starting quarterback. Now you look last year, you look at a guy like Chase Griffin, Elite 11 guy, very, very talented. He is going to have an incredibly bright future outside of football. This kid is going to be, he could potentially be the future mayor of Los Angeles, the future senator of California. This kid's future is so bright. On the football field, he's 5'7". He doesn't quite have the explosiveness to justify putting a kid out there that's 5'7". He's not Kyler Murray. He's not Russell Wilson. 5'7", that's a tough size, durability, and he doesn't have the explosiveness. Realistically, neither of those two guys were going to challenge DTR very much. Chip was stuck with DTR for 4 years. I think it becomes very interesting next year with Garbers and the 4-star kid that we've got to commit from. And I think that quarterback battle is going to be really interesting in the spring. And to see Chip with a new quarterback, I think, is an additional data point. Similarly, he's going to have to cut ties with Ozanero and have a new defensive coordinator. My thinking would be, as bad as things are, can you imagine if Chip went to Arizona State? They're on the cusp of sanctions. I don't think Herm Edwards is going to survive that. If he went to an Arizona State, or if he went to a Washington State, which is another vacancy, and they blew up offensive, how bad would we feel as Bruin Nation to not sort of see that through? I think that's point number one. Point number two, and I think what's the most important point, and it's a little bit more off the field, is the $9 million buyout. And so Chip's contract, there's the $9 million buyout. If he gets fired before January 15, 2022, he is owed $9 million. And so effectively now, Martin Jarmond and the athletic department has to say, can we justify paying $14 million next year for a coach? $9 million to fire our current coach, and in the order of $5 million to hire a new coach moving forward. Considering that the athletic department's budget over the last 2 years lost a total of $40 million, a $40 million deficit in the athletic department budget over the last 2 years. Couple that with the Under Armour deal going south. That was a 15-year, $280 million contract that went belly up. The Jordan Brand deal was great, but it was only 6 years, $47 million. So you're talking about a $20 million apparel deal versus an $8 million apparel deal. To go for Martin Jarmond to be in a place like UCLA, which is a very complex environment from a political standpoint. You have the chancellor, you have the UC regents, you have the state of California. To be able to go to the regions, to be able to go to the state and try and justify $14 million for the coach next year, I don't think he's going to want to burn that political capital so early in his tenure, especially when the next question becomes, okay, you get rid of Chip, who do you go get? It's one thing to say, we're going to spend $16 to $18 million a year on a coach next year. If you're going to go get Nick Saban, if you're going to go get Dabo Swinney, if you're going to go get Jimbo Fisher, but who's out there? Is James Franklin a good coach? I don't know. Is Matt Campbell a good coach? I don't know. Part of the challenges with the college football playoff the last 6 or 7 years, there's a supply and demand problem in college football. When you have the same 4 or 5 teams making the playoff every year and winning the national championship every year, there's very little on the have-not side of teams sort of breaking into that. And so coaches are getting rewarded for getting close 1 year or 2 years, not necessarily for accomplishing anything on the field. And so for me, that's really big point number 2 is the financials. And I think the third piece is if UCLA were to let Chip go, it would be the first time in the history of college football in Los Angeles that both USC and UCLA would be looking for a coach the same year. And I don't know if that is in UCLA's best interest to sort of go head-to-head, UCLA football to go head-to-head with USC football in the same market. I think this sort of brings itself to sort of a larger question of what is Martin Jarmond's vision and expectation for UCLA football. Will, you and I have talked about it, 23-year conference title drought, right? And 5 out of those 23 years, UCLA football was in contention to win a division or a conference title in the second half of November. So 5 of those 23 years. If you look at those 5 years, one was 05, it was year 3 of Durrell, and it was first 4 years of Jim Mora. So there was a 4 straight year run where we were competing for division and conference titles. What was significant about that period of time? It was that SC was on sanctions. And when you talk about a recruiting class, you're always going to get the dividends of that recruiting class 2 years later. You know that, I know that. Look what the landscape was. 2010, 2011, SC had a bowl ban. 2010, 2011, 2012, SC had scholarship reduction. What were UCLA's best years? 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. And when you look at the landscape of UCLA football, I'm not convinced we have figured out the larger strategy of how to win in modern college football with the advent of money that's been thrown in professional football and the explosion of the popularity of college football and the money that's required to compete and having to share a city with SC. You can't really talk about UCLA football without talking SC football to a certain extent, because they share a city. It's the Harry Potter and the Voldemort. They're sort of attached at the hip in a lot of ways. And so for those 3 reasons, kind of variety at quarterback and defensive coordinator, the financials, and strategic placement of going for a coach at the same time as SC, I don't see it. I don't see Chip losing his job. As he goes 7-5, he's coming back, much to the chagrin, I think, of most of Bruin Nation.
I think you made some phenomenal points there, and I want to touch on a couple of them. If we were to lose Chip Kelly, like you said in the first point, and he did go to an Arizona State, a Washington State, and he did turn up the numbers offensively like we've seen him do in the past at Oregon, even to Philadelphia Eagles for an extent. He had that one first year that was phenomenal there. That would hurt Bruin Nation, I think, to a point where it's like, not only did we have the guy, we lost him and we blew it once again. That is a tough scenario, especially we've talked about this offense. There is 5 guys off the top of my head offensively that will play on Sundays in some capacity. 2 of them are running backs. I think Alec Anderson and Sean Ryan are both going to play in the NFL. And our guy Greg Dulcich is going to be there. Kyle Phillips could potentially be there as a guy, but there's a lot of talent on this offense. That's what makes it frustrating that Chip wasn't able to put together here. But if he is to put it together in a different place, that makes it all the more frustrating for UCLA fan base. You also brought up the salary standpoint. Chip Kelly is the 12th highest paid college football coach in the nation. I mean, his 15-25 record does not reflect him being the 12th highest paid coach, but he came in with the prestige of, gaining Oregon into, essentially a national landscape when it comes to college football. They are a brand now, a tangible brand when it comes to college football. The buyout is an issue, but I do think there is a loophole there with January 15th. They would have to risk essentially an entire recruiting class to make that happen if they were going to pull the trigger on firing him. But, if he does finish, let's say loses to Colorado, like I mentioned earlier, loses to Cal, maybe they beat both of them and USC beats the tar out of them. Like, it is similar to what we saw against Utah, where it's a 20-plus point victory against UCLA. Is that enough to keep them when you're embarrassed by a team that doesn't have a coach right now, and they lost their only real playmaker in Drake London? Maybe that's a case there. So, yes, the deadline is something to potentially look at, but there's also a loophole for UCLA if they really want to pull the plug and not pay him that amount of money. Third, I think you're spot on with it. Who do we get that's better than Chip Kelly? You have to have a plan in place. I was looking up, before this podcast, just hypothetically thinking of guys we could bring in here. I'm looking at PJ Fleck. He's 6-2 at Minnesota right now. And I know he's probably looking to maybe get to another. Why would he come to UCLA when SC has the prestige, the money, everything to throw at him? When UCLA, as much as I am a UCLA fan, we don't have the history of success that USC does. That, unfortunately, is the brand within Los Angeles. You're essentially competing for number 2 when it comes to coaches if SC and UCLA are both battling out for a coaching hire. So all valid points, and I think those are all things to look at. Only time will tell if Chip Kelly can get it done in the next couple weeks, but we got to hope that he does, because I don't even think UCLA wants to fire Chip Kelly. We want this thing to work. And if we can get to a bowl game this year, 7-5, was it as good as we thought it was going to be when we beat LSU? No, not even close. But 7-5, you're at least back in the bowl picture. Like you said, we secured that 4-star quarterback recruit. By the way, he threw 13 touchdown passes in a football game this past weekend. That got me excited as a UCLA fan, thinking we're bringing that guy into Westwood to compete with Garbers next year. So hopefully that dude is out there spinning the rock for UCLA. But all great points, Jamal. I want to move on to Garbers, who we just talked about. Ethan Garbers came off the bench. It was a tough situation. That is not an easy place to play at Utah. He did relatively well. He went 27 of 44 through the air, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. What did you make of Garbers' performance, given the circumstances his first career start as a Bruin?
I thought he was phenomenal, actually. And I think the loss, again, was much less to do with Garbers' lack of performance than it was the defense. I thought Garbers was stellar, in particular the first 2 drives. He started 5 for 5. He was spreading the ball out all over the field. That we were balanced with the run game. It was 14-10. We were kind of going shot for shot with them. There was a little bit of bad luck in the middle of the second quarter with that tip ball. And then ultimately, we just couldn't find that stop. And the spread just became larger and larger. But overall, I thought he competed his tail off. I think the ball just kind of looks different when it comes off of his hand than it does with DTR. There's a zip on it. There's an accuracy to it. There's just an overall polish. I think next year, Chip is probably going to have to, or whoever the coach will be, is not going to have him run as much. I thought 14 carries for Garbers was too much. He was put in some tough 3rd and short, 4th and short situations where he's just not that guy. He's a little bit more of a pocket polished passer who happens to run than just sort of an athlete there. But on the fly, I thought he was phenomenal. And I think that there's a lot to be excited about moving forward. In particular, that second half, he came in, orchestrated 2 touchdown drives, had a great ball, deep ball Dakota, where he stood in the pocket on the goal line of Utah, one of the most hostile places to play in the Pac-12, drilled a great ball. He had that sort of post corner, 35 yards to Phillips on the throw right after. I thought he did a great job. One of the areas where I think he's significantly better than DTR already is the ability to find narrow windows in the red zone. I can't recall a time when we had multiple passing touchdowns in a game the last couple of years inside the red zone. It's usually sort of right at the goal line. It's a play action, or we're kind of going deep, but we always really run the ball in the red zone. Garbers found those tight windows and really put some zip on the ball. I'm really excited about the future of quarterback at UCLA with Garbers.
I think it's easy to see, too. I mean, there was that third quarter completion to Kyle Phillips where the camera could barely keep up with the dart that was being thrown to Phillips. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, too, when I had you and Carrie on. Is it time to maybe, check out Garbers, see what he can do? I love that we opened up the passing a little bit more because DTR, I think from a standpoint, he does kind of fit more of Chip's system with the dual threat quarterback and things of that nature. But we have so many receiving options, and it was just nice to see guys like Chase Cota get involved, like you mentioned with that. Greg Dulcich had 6 catches for 52 yards. I'd have to double check. That might be tied for his season high on catches because we just haven't seen it. DTR is very a first read, second read type of guy. You can see Garbers was a little bit better as progressions, looking around. Those checkdowns, to Britton Brown, they move the chains. That's all you want to see as a UCLA fan, just keep moving the football down the field. So if that's the first taste we get of Garbers, I'm excited. I don't even think DTR could have came in there if our defense let up 44 points and win that game. So Garbers, a lot to be encouraged about coming into next year with him maybe starting at the quarterback position. Jamal, I'm going to let you leave on a last 3 predictions. Do we sweep the rest of the season, or do we get maybe a Chip Kelly firing? Where are you going with this?
Well, it's going to be either 2 out of 3 or all 3. I think Cal, Colorado, at home, those are wins. I think the SC game is sort of a 50-50. I think because part of it is there's no Drake London. It feels like on paper SC's ready to kind of mail it in for the year, but they may play Jackson Dart. Who knows? And, things could get really interesting there. I'm going to lean in. I'm going to say it's going to be a sweep. They'll go 8-4, and Chip comes back one more year.
You guys can't see if you're not watching the video, but I gave a huge fist bump to that. I think we get it done as well, Jamal. I think Colorado, there's just nothing to be worried about offensively with them. I just don't think they're a complete football team. One of the worst in the Pac-12. SC, anything could happen in a rivalry game. I do want to throw that out there. But you got to feel a little bit better with Drake London out. Coaching change there. And I'd rather face Keaton Slovis than Jackson Dart. So I'm hoping Slovis is the starting quarterback for SC. And then Cal, we could have a Garbers Bowl in case something happens to DTR. Chase Garbers, Ethan Garbers' brother, has been the longtime starting quarterback for the Cal Bears. I'm kind of hoping that's the outcome and maybe we get a victory. If we can get to 8 wins, I can feel satisfied going into bowl season with a potential for 9 wins. Jamal, you may not have been wrong in that 9-win thing if we can get into a bowl game and win that too. Jamal, thank you so much for coming on. Readers of the LA Football Network, check him out. He does one of the best columns for the UCLA Bruins week in and week out. Any final thoughts, Jamal?
Will, thanks so much for having me. And Bruin faithful, let's stick with it. These are some tough times, but this is a team that has the ability to really turn things around, and hopefully we can finish strong.
Let's stick with it, Bruin Nation. Bruin Bible.